Leinster La Rochelle obviously tomorrow, and we've been sort of debating exactly as to what we're going to do in terms of covering this one, and we've landed on the idea that I'm going to choose a Leinster 15 based off players that, at least this is my understanding of what we're choosing here, based off players that have started in any of the 5 finals, and we're including a probable team for tomorrow, and the stipulation, as Joe Conroy threw down the mantle, saying that we have to pick players who are at the peak of their powers for a one-off must-win match.
Okay.
Is that fair enough?
Good idea.
So what we'll do is we'll go through the pack first. We'll give the runners and riders, and then I'll give my selection, and then we can pick through any points of contention as you see it.
Adrian Barry's all-time Leinster 15. Let's go.
We'll start with the loose head props, and the options here are Cian Healy, who started the first 4, and Andrew Porter, who will probably start tomorrow. So that's the options there. At hooker, it's Jackman 09, Richard Strauss for the following 2, Sean Cronin at 18, or Ronan Keller tomorrow. The tight head position is between Stan Wright, Mike Ross and Tig.
Ooh.
Gets really competitive in the second row, where you have at number 4 Leo for the first 3, Big Dev in 18, or Ross Maloney for tomorrow, where at 5 you have Big Mal in 09, Nathan Hines in 11, Brad Thorne in 2012, and then James Ryan in 18 and 22. That is a particularly competitive position. Blindside flanker, we have Rocky in 09, Kevin McLaughlin in 11 and 12, Scott Fardy in 18, and then Caelan Doris. Open side, Shane Jennings in 09, you have Sean O'Brien in 11 and 12, you have Dan Levy in 18, and then Josh van der Flyer. I mean,
but there's there's a pretty obvious. Well, we'll come to it in a sec. Where you can shift people.
You can shift people on. Okay. That is true. To continue the theme of the morning, you can absolutely shift people. And then at number 8, you have Jamie Heaslip in 9, 11 and 12, Geordie Murphy in 18, and then Jack Coleman.
Okay, take us through who you've gone for here.
So my selections are, the pack is going to be Cian Healy at loose head prop.
Okay, that's bang.
Fairly straightforward. Bang. World class, lion, locks on the scrum, good in the loose. Probably suffered a little bit after that hand injury in terms of his open play, and obviously is aging now and is taking a bit of a backseat, but I think that's a banker. Hooker was really tough, and it sort of came down to 2, and I'm going to go with the guy who's going to start tomorrow, Ronan Keller.
Ooh, interesting.
I think, a tough call. The others all have different attributes that they bring to the party, but he probably has a little bit of everything.
More Sean Cronin. A slander coming your way from Adrian Barry of a Friday morning. It's okay.
Scrummaging, Jackman scrummaging, the defence of Strauss, the running of Cronin. He's probably the best all-rounder. He's only 24.
Yeah.
So, look, I know we're not picking a team for the future, but you have to say that...
who's your sub? Is Dan Sheehan potentially your sub?
Possibly. Strauss, probably, if you're pushing me for a one-off big game sub, I'd probably go with Strauss.
Hey, interesting.
That's Hooker.
Right, okay. Lee Kelleher, who else?
And then completing the front row is going to be Tig.
Okay, yeah. We don't really need to spend too much time on that.
There was no great debate about that. Okay. Like, Stan Wright is obviously a cult hero. Mike Ross has won 2 Heineken Cups. Started 2 Heineken Cups. But it's got to be Tig. It's no great debate
about that. So it's the Healy Kelleher furlong. It's a recency that kind of tints that front row. Not to say that it's not the best front row, though.
Yeah, if you make that, you won't be making that comment at the end.
Okay, let's go.
I'll put it that way to you. Second row, right? So you had Leo Cullen, obviously, with the first 3 Heineken Cups, and then Devon and Ross Maloney. And I'm sort of roughly I know we can be fluid, but I'm roughly sticking with position, and I got to go with Leo. I think you're talking about like a big game, the personality of the guy, the leadership. Not to mention the qualities that he had around the pitch. I just think if you're talking about wanting to win a big game, he's a big game player, and he's got to be in there.
Interesting. That's a hair's breadth between himself and Toner, surely.
I think, yeah, look, when you talk about peak of their powers, Devon probably would run that close. Leo probably had more longevity in the front line, but no, I got to be going for Leo there. And then on the other side, this was the Big Mal versus Hines versus Thorne versus James Ryan, and I've gone for Brad Thorne. I think that...
Could you not just do Brad Thorne and James Ryan and be done with it?
You could. That's what Coach Sheehan is going for. Coach Barry is going for Leo. Because look, the leadership thing is, I wouldn't underplay that. And look at when you look at the team I've selected to play this imaginary game.
Yeah.
There's leadership all over the place. But the personality, the grunt, he's been there and done it. There's no big game nerves. he changed it. He helped himself and Shane Jennings coming back from Leicester, amongst other factors, was such a big thing in changing the personality of that Leinster team. And it's not a like nostalgia pick or whatever else. But I think you got to go for Leo.
Okay, so Leo and Brad Thorne is your second
Brad Thorne, one of the greatest locks of all time, Paul O'Connell type figure, huge influence on that squad. They all talk about it, including Devon, about the impact that they had on him, and a big game player, like considered one of the greatest locks of all time. He is the lock at lock. He's the one that you got to start.
I like that line. That's our headline.
Back row, Rocky versus Kevin McLaughlin versus Scott Vardy versus Caelan Doris, and I've gone for Rocky.
Okay.
Gone for Rocky at blindside flanker here. Partly based on the stats. Like, look, he was a one-season wonder, which was not to say that he fell off a cliff either side, but at Leinster he was in for one season. He played 21 games. How many Man of the Match awards did he win in 21 games?
Oh, like probably 12, 15.
14. Like, also including in that famous quarter-final against Harlequins, was Man of the Match, and in the final as well.
And this was before Alan Quinlan was picking Man of the Match in these games as well, so there was no back row bias. Before
Alan Quinlan was picked Man of the Match, and actually looking back at some of the highlights of the semi-final against Munster, there was a few little sort of over and back between himself and Quinny, so much so that we've asked Quinny to do up his thoughts on Rocky Elsom, which I don't know is it standing by, but we might come to it in a couple of moments. Quinny's thoughts on the selection of Rocky Elsom there. But yeah, like a bit of an enigma off the pitch. All of his teammates would talk about his how much of an enigma he was off the pitch. Like you would actually rarely see him at training, and when he was there he wouldn't be doing very much, and they wouldn't be mingled much off the pitch. Never came back for the 10-year anniversary of the game when everybody else was there. And you also have to remind yourself he was 26 when he was in Dublin.
Thought he was a lot older,
isn't he? Exactly. Yeah. You look at those pictures thinking maybe the guy was about 45, and in that Munster game, like, he was up against Quinlan, Wallace, Leamy, like, you know. So
I think Rocky Elsom is I think cult status actually kind of underplays how beloved he is in the Leinster fraternity. So Elsom's your 6.
Elsom is the 6, and then you have Shane Jennings, you've Sean O'Brien, Levy, and Josh van der Fleer for open side, and I've gone for Sean O'Brien. Like, you could try and shift things around here to make room for Josh van der Fleer, but
it's essentially what you're looking at in this back row is Rocky Elsom versus van der Fleer as opposed to O'Brien versus van der Fleer. You could have shifted,
and look, with most of these, the same with Sean O'Brien. If you wanted to make room, you could shift him around a little bit. He's obviously played in all the positions, and there'd be no problem with doing that. But when you talk about the lock at lock, I think he's a lock in the back row as well. I think you have to make room for him. The abrasiveness, like a brilliant runner in the loose, selfless player, would often sacrifice himself for the cause of the team. Just a quality operator in all facets. Also had that edge about him, hadn't he? Like a real bit of a, you know, if you talk about a little bit of a nastiness that you need in a big game, then he definitely had that. Serious ability to sort of take a tackle and keep going. So man of the match in the final in 2012, and also, like, look, it wasn't really about this, but certainly helped change the perception of Leinster as being a D4 team. You know, like, was one of those that was very much at the forefront of that. So
I'm not arguing on Sean O'Brien.
Great debate about that.
Absolutely can't. You're number 8.
Jamie Heaslip. It really has to be. Again, there was no huge
who's second? Who was your second choice out of interest here? Conan,
it has to be. Yeah. Jordy Murphy started in 18, but never really went on to fulfil the potential that I think everybody thought he would have had. But yeah, like, I mean, look, you're right. I could have shifted a couple of players around there to make room. I could have left Elsom out. Might have been the easy decision to make, but I just think for everything that he brought to Leinster that season, we're talking about a one-off game where you're putting your best team out and you want to go and win it. And, like, look, at some of this is about, you know, Josh van der Fleer might make an absolute mockery of the selection in a few years' time. You actually forget that he's 29, and he's been around the scene a little bit. Has only really started to make the impact that he's having now in the last year or two. You know, there had been a lot of question marks about his bulk and ability against the bigger packs to operate, but yeah, that's what I'm going with. O'Brien, Heaslip, and Rocky Elsom across the back row.
Yeah, it's good back row. I think you could. It's definitely not set in stone. I think there's definitely an argument to be made, but it's a strong back row
and a good bench.
Absolutely outstanding bench. So Half backs, obviously, it's going to be Sexton at 10. Who's your scrum half going to be?
There isn't even a competition at 10, as in there's nobody else to choose from. Like, from across the 5 finals, he comes in for Cantapomi in that Munster famously semi-final in 2009 and never looks back, so no debate. The options at 9 are Chris Whittaker, who started in 2009, Owen Redden, who started in 11 and 12, and then Luke McGrath in 18, and Gibson Park, obviously, who'll start tomorrow. So I have gone for... This was a hard one. I've gone for Owen Redden. This was a hard one. Like, again, Gibson Park has really... There's a lot of Van der Fleer comparisons there, in the sense that he's really come into it. He's changed his game a little bit in the last while. And again, could make a mockery of this in a few years' time. But right now, going for a big game, Gibson Park would not be far behind. Whittaker wouldn't be far behind. But Redden, everything you want in a scrum half in terms of that, excellent delivery, fast delivery, the main things that you need. Never had the physicality maybe of a player like Whittaker, who was the perfect fit for that time. But yeah, Owen Redden is who I'm going for there.
So an all-Munster half-back pairing at Leinster, Redden and Sexton. Who are you going for in midfield?
An all what?
An all-Munster half-back, Limerick and Kerry represented at 9 and 10.
I'll give you the options across the rest of the backs.
Do it, yeah.
So at 15, Isa in 09 and 11, Rob Carney in 12 and 18, and then Hugo Keenan. You had Shane Horgan on the right wing for 9 and 11, Fergus McFadden, Jordan Larmour, and Jimmy O'Brien, the other options there. Brian O'Driscoll, 9, 11, 12, and Gary Ringrose, 18 and 22. Gordon Darcy at inside centre, 9, 11, 12, and then Robbie Henshaw subsequently. And then you had Luke Fitzgerald in 9 and 11 on the left wing, and Isa 12 and 18, having started the other games at full back, and then James Lowe.
Okay, so 13 is locked in. That's Brian O'Driscoll. We'll start with the easy one.
Nothing to be said about him. Yeah.
Who's your 12?
Who is my 12? Well, there are a couple of players who are going to be very, very unfortunate to be left out of this. I would include Josh Van der Fleer as one of those. I would obviously, it broke my heart I was up until 4 o'clock this morning on crying tears over having to leave Big Mal out of the team. The third player that I would consider to be exceptionally unfortunate not to make this team is Robbie Henshaw.
I like the way you're just going to put aside some time to talk up Robbie Henshaw now, because you've ruthlessly left him out of your team. The fact is, you don't think Robbie Henshaw is good enough to get into your all-time Leinster team.
No,
so who is good enough to get in there?
There is a cigarette paper between them, and I've gone for Gordon Darcy at inside centre.
Cohesion between himself and O'Driscoll, I guess.
Well, there is a bit of that. I think that in the grand scheme, history says that Brian O'Driscoll was an absolute star, and he played alongside this other guy. But for anybody who was watching rugby over those years, like, Gordon Darcy was such an important player for Leinster, such an important player for making Brian O'Driscoll the player he was, and just never really got the praise that he should have got because of the guy that he was playing alongside. But look, there was nothing between them. It was an impossible call. I had selected Henshaw at one point, and then I revised my pick. Could have gone either way. Darcy, both of them actually have brilliant subtlety to their play, serious pace when it's required, but I do think that it's a marker of how high that I regard Darcy, that I've selected him above Henshaw, who I think at the minute is one of the first names. I'm constantly having to find myself not tweeting about Robbie Henshaw, because I just find myself wanting all the time to talk about how amazing he is. He's an incredible player.
You've done really well to talk a lot about Robbie Henshaw here in a slot where you've awarded the jersey to Gordon Darcy, so congratulations to Gordon Darcy.
If I was crafting this, there's such fine margins between them. It's possible if I was writing this team 36 hours time, I'd be including Robbie Henshaw.
It's okay if you don't think he's the number one choice, number 12 in the history of Leinster. That's totally fine. It is literally what you said. So Darcy is your number one choice 12.
Nothing between them.
O'Driscoll, your 13. So do you want to go with the wingers here first?
Yeah, we'll go right wing. It has to be Shane Horgan, really. Again, what a player, like, very much of his time. For some reason, Northampton 11 kicked endlessly to him, thinking that he might be a bit of a weak spot. They hadn't been doing too much homework. He could play it any which way you want. A legend of Irish rugby. Who else do you go for? Like, maybe Jimmy O'Brien in a few years' time, but it was another one of those that didn't really cause a huge amount of scratching of the head. So Horgan at 14, and on the left wing, this is where I did a little bit of jiggery pokery, and you could not have a Leinster starting 15 from the 5 finals, including tomorrow, that doesn't include Ian Asewa. He's got to be on the team. Luke Fitzgerald is another one for that replacements bench. It's full of. Is it full of bags? No, it's not. We got a good even split so far. Very hard to leave out. Class player, like renowned. You know, when you think about him, you think about the pace, but like, geez, what a defensive player he was as well. But Isa, you just couldn't leave him out. He would cut through the tiniest of gaps. Brilliant under a high ball. Any player that you've ever heard that played with him that talked about him was always talking about like what a skillful player he was, intelligent player, kicking penalties in the 18 final, like had a bit of everything. The beauty, actually, watching back some of his penalties yesterday, he had this real lovely talent to just give the ball just enough. Never needed to be sort of kicked into a row's edge, just enough. Lovely little style, nice little sort of pitch and wedge style about him.
And like, I think we sometimes like forget that he won it for Leinster in 2018 as well.
Yes,
like, I think sometimes we, I don't know. I think that we can sometimes just forget the real contribution he had in the critical moments for Leinster, and it's not sort of a token pick to put him in there because of the fact that, again, he kind of comes into that category when you think of him immediately, like Elsom, as this cult hero in Leinster, but he's just so much more than that. How close did James Lowe come to making this? He didn't even figure by the sounds of things. Like Luke Fitzgerald would have been ahead of him in the mix for sure.
I didn't overly consider him.
That's fair.
Well, it seems ridiculously harsh, but I had to make room for Isa. Like, maybe I could have put Lowe on the other wing and leave out Shane Horgan, but again, that would have been recency bias.
We have one more position, full back. It's a head-to-head between Keenan and Carney here, right? Or
yeah, because I've moved Isa onto the wing and I've gone for Rob Kearney. Like, what a trio. Again, not much between them. If anybody was to select any of the three of those players at 15, there's no argument to be made. There are comparisons. If I pick Rob Kearney, comparisons with the other two, very good in the air. Probably doesn't have the pace of the others, but like a real big game player. 2012, probably the best fullback in Europe at that time. And again, there would be a will to put Hugo Keenan in there, but I do think, again, there'd be a bit of a recency bias there, and I've tried to remove myself from that as much as I possibly could. But for that reason, Owen, I'm going for Rob Kearney.
It's a good team. Just to recap it is Kearney, Horgan, Nasewa, Bod, Darcy, Sexton, Redden, and then the pack is Healy, Kelleher, Furlong, Leo Cullen, Brad Thorne, Rocky Elsom, Sean O'Brien, JB Heaslip. I think he did well there.
It's pretty good. And the subs bench is off the charts.
Yeah, it is. Good depth.
We'd be very interested to hear. I'm sure people out there have opinions as to people that have included or haven't, and do lash them into us, whatever it is that, whatever your thoughts on it, do fire them in ahead of the game tomorrow. Obviously, it's 8:45.